Hello again. Today we're with Michael Ventura talking about film Marty and the film The Dogfight or Dogfight. Marty came out in 1955 and Dogfight came out in 1991, I think. And they both revolve around some of the same themes of conventionally unattractive people and loneliness and the sorrow of that and working through that and working through sadness and kind of finding the light in other people and beyond their exterior vestures. So why don't you start talking about Marty, Michael?
Well, Marty, I hadn't seen it in a long time, and as I watched it, it was very personal to me. I'll get the personal out of the way first, because it's the Bronx in 1955. I was born into that world in 1945, and it's Italian. Something that struck me as kind of funny is that the women playing the mother and the aunt, and they're Italian actresses, but their accents were terrible. And they put an A at the end of every word. We didn't do that. that's that was a satire on Italians. So the A was at the end of every word, and these women had to know it. But I think the thinking behind the false accents was America gets its Italian accent from, Chico Marx, and who wasn't Italian, and and they kind of played into that. So I had to get past that, the accents, because they were so bad. But uh, but those streets, they filmed it in the Bronx. That elevated was an elevated that I took to go to and from work in the '60s, and and this was life in the neighborhood of that time, and it was the time, 1955, before rock and roll became the medium of young people. That didn't start happening really until 1956, although there was some rock and roll hits like Rock Around the Clock that had gotten into the top 20. So these people were dancing to kind of outdated swing music at the Stardust Ballroom, and 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 there's the sense of the family, there's a sense of the neighborhood, there's a sense of the neighborhood bar, which is not a sleazy place. It's where all the guys and some of the women go, and everybody knows each other. Hey, did Frankie come in yet? No, he didn't come in yet, kind of thing. And that sense of the neighborhood, which was quite real for a long time. And a neighborhood was a almost self-contained unit of several blocks. And if you moved out of the neighborhood, even just a quarter of a mile away, a half a mile away, you were going to a completely different set of grocery stores and hardware stores and shoemakers and this kind of thing. And you were really gone because your world was contained. Now, a big thing in this film is Marty is a butcher, and the guy he works for, the guy who owns the butcher shop, wants to sell it to Marty, and Marty's decision is, do I sell it because the supermarkets are coming? Now, at this time, that was what was going on economically. 55 to 65, the small stores were being pushed out by the supermarkets. Because at the small stores, at a deli, a quart of milk cost 25 cents. At the supermarket, it cost 18 cents or 20 cents. And for that nickel, you lost that intimacy. Because the deli guy or the butcher guy, they kept a pad on the counter, or just under the counter, and they put it on your tab.
Yeah.
If they knew when your payday was, you could come in and say, "Put it on my tab, okay, Jack? Okay, kid, I put it on your tab." And obviously, the AMP wasn't going to do that. And so there was an intimacy that was being lost. What I thought, as Marty was deciding whether to buy the butcher shop, I went, "Don't, man, because you're going to be working for the butcher in the supermarket that's going to take over your neighborhood. And there's going to be several butcher shop guys who are going to go for that job. And the first one is going to get it. And you better be the first one, or you're going to have to be in your 40s, 50s, you're going to have to be something other than a butcher." But Marty, of course, played wonderfully by Ernest Borgnine. He doesn't know it. And the girl he meets, the woman he meets at the Stardust Dance Hall, who neither one of them belong at the Stardust Dance Hall, and that's how they meet each other. They really recognize that they don't belong there. And she's I think a science teacher at a high school in Brooklyn, and she's played by Betsy Blair. Now, another contact, and she's thin, she's kind of homely. She doesn't look like the ideal of New York City girls in the 1950s. And she's not a girl, she's 29. At that time, you're not married by 20. You're a girl, a woman, you're not married by 29, you're a spinster. And at that time, Marty's 34, you're not married by 34. Everybody's wondering about you. That thing of, why aren't you married? Why aren't you married? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Was a real thing. I know when I went to my brother Vinny's wedding, he was getting married. My cousin Rocco, my cousin Tony, they were already married. I was the eldest male in the clan. And finally, my grandmother on my father's side, she says to me, "Michael, why aren't you married?" And that was the question on everybody's mind, and she actually said it. So that's a real thing. And these two people who are out of place in their world, they meet. And the sense of being out of place together is very, very strong in the picture. And the way that the family and the friends of Marty, we don't see her family and friends. We see her family very briefly. We don't see the life she leads. The sense that they don't want him to change. The mother is afraid that a wife will push her out of the picture. The friend, Angie, is afraid that he's not going to have a friend anymore to be miserable with. The guys on the block are crass. They're in their mid to late 20s, maybe early 30s, and they're not married yet either. Mainly because they're assholes, I think. But everybody wants Marty to stay the same. And that what he says at the end of "I'm not going to be miserable like you people." And he finds his freedom, the freedom personal to him, in following his heart with this woman and buying the butcher shop. Whatever consequences come. And the other thing to me that was really important in this script by Patty Chayefsky, who knew this world very well, was the dignity of work is assumed. It is good to be a butcher. We need butchers, people who know the cut of meat. It's good to be a science high school teacher. These things have no prestige, but they keep the world, the society going. It's good to be a worker, because without the workers, we don't eat. We don't get from place to place. The dignity of work is an assumed thing in this picture, and that is so rare in cinema and in American culture. It gives the film a presence, an elevated presence that you're not even noticing because they don't make a thing of it. But he says he's just a butcher, and she says, no, that's good. And she's just a single woman English teacher, but he sees the value in her. Another thing about this film, and that's not, of course, in the film, but that has a context for me, is Delbert Mann, the director, Patty Chayefsky, the writer, and Betsy Blair, the actress who plays the woman, all were blacklisted very soon after. Delbert Mann didn't get another film to direct for at least a decade. Patty Chayefsky made it as a playwright, but didn't get another big script until, I believe, Hospital or Network, like 20 years later. And Betsy Blair was blacklisted. And I don't remember another major film she was in. So that's my context for it. The other thing I'd say is that the guys who Marty interacts with, they're the guys on the block. These aren't friends you choose. These are friends you grew up with. Because the block was the block. The neighborhood was the neighborhood. You really didn't leave it, hardly at all. Going down from the Bronx to 72nd Street, where all the girls are really hot, which is total bullshit. But he has it. They have it in their heads. If we go to 72nd Street, there's happiness there. 72nd Street in Manhattan. There's a 20-minute subway ride, and it's a totally other world away in their minds. It's actually a world that's not so different from theirs, but it's a totally different world in their minds. And the L that we see when we hear the train, the sound work, by the way, is really good. That's what the street sounded like. That the L, as it gets to the Harlem River that separates the Bronx and Manhattan, it goes underground, under the river, stays underground, and goes to 72nd Street, and depending on which L it is, it goes to 72nd Street and which train is running on it. On the east side, where there's no action at all, or on the west side, where it's 72nd Street and Broadway, and that's the scene of the early 70s movie Panic in Needle Park. It was a rough neighborhood. So I don't know what they expected to find there, but it's a totally other world to them, and that's where heaven is. But no, Marty knows there's no heaven there. So that's pretty much my bunch of impressions for that. The most striking thing toward the end is how his family and friends do not want him to change. They don't want that girl who isn't Italian. That was a big thing. She's not Italian. She's not Italian. She's not Italian. They don't want her in their world because it means Marty has outgrown them. And it's the only way he can find happiness. That's what he realizes at the end. The only way he can find happiness is to outgrow the people he's known all his life. That's a hell of a thing. That's what I got.
Yeah, I didn't, until you mentioned it at the start, I didn't see that whole undercurrent of kind of the dignity of the working class and that whole like theme in the movie that is there for sure. Yeah, that's interesting, and I became kind of fascinated by Betsy Blair. She's a pretty interesting person. I guess they weren't gonna let her be in this movie, but she was married to Gene Kelly, and and he like had some pull. He was a progressive, but he wasn't like Marxist, and he was such a big star.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess she became really interested in Marxism around the same time as a lot of other people, and was questioned by HUAC and everything, and then she moves to Europe, and she marries Carl Rice,
Mm-hmm.
who's I think he's a Czech director and cinematographer, and
Yes.
then she's in a couple of Costa Gavras movies later on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and pretty interesting person, but yeah, her performance and Ernest Borgnine's performance are pretty good, very good, and
He won the Academy Award, which was
yeah,
interesting because he didn't look like a star. I mean, he looks like Marty.
yeah. I saw an interview with him where he had just been playing heavies for most of his career, right. And he was on the set of Bad Day at Black Rock playing a heavy in that movie, and Patty Chayefsky and Delbert Mann come. For some reason, they thought he'd be a good guy to play this part, and they came and they all read the script together, and I guess they all started crying when they were like working out one of the scenes. Yeah, you should look at that interview. It's on YouTube. It's pretty good. But I guess Rod Steiger did that role in the teleplay, because there was a teleplay before they made a movie out of it.
Right.
But and I've never seen that, but that sounds interesting. But yeah,
I thought about that too. I knew that too. Borgnine is a much more sympathetic actor than Rod Steiger.
Yeah.
Rod Steiger is a terrific actor.
Yeah.
But Borgnine can make you cry. I don't think Rod Steiger can.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of Rod Steiger as Napoleon in Waterloo. And,
yeah.
Rod Steiger is kind of like a simmering undertone guy, and
exactly.
And Borgnine is really naked in this movie.
Yep.
He's innocent, and he's not hiding anything in this film.
Right.
And,
exactly.
It's a really a very sympathetic character, even in the non-emotional scenes. Even when you watch him working as a butcher, there's a real energy to this film that isn't even in the scenes where it's just his brother and his brother's wife, and the scenes that don't involve Borgnine and Betsy Blair. Even there's like this real energy in this movie, and I don't know if it's Patty Chayefsky's doing or what it is, but every scene has this real, like, genuine kind of energy behind it.
Well, in every scene, even the scenes that you wouldn't think, in every scene there's something elemental going on. There's a mother-son. There's a sister-to-sister thing with the mother and her sister. There's palpable loneliness, or there's palpable hope. Chayefsky does that very, very well, and these actors just love it. I mean, you can see the actors just being completely in the parts, because there's really something to do. In this film, anybody with a line in it has something to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat in every scene, definitely, and even the scenes where it's just the mother and the sister talking, even like I could tell too that the accents were kind of exaggerated, but even in those scenes, you really get an idea of their character and what's going on in that scene, and Yeah.
You get, when they're not around the younger people, they're very frank with each other, and very very accepting of each other, very frank with each other, and very resigned. The sister Christina is old at 56. Jasmine and I are watching it. Jasmine's 55. In this movie, she would be considered an old woman. In this generation, I remember my mother. My mother in her 50s was an old woman. In this generation, my generation is really the first generation where you're not considered an old person at 50. If you read Chekhov or Tolstoy or Theodore Dreiser, when they talk about people in their 50s, they're talking about old people. They call them old. Now, one reason is people tended to die in their early 60s, late 50s. That was a medium time to die. But life was such that was the society's convention. But in these scenes with the sisters, all their facades drop, and they're just who they are, and that's a very powerful thing to see. So you're right I agree about the energy in every scene, even though nothing seems to be going on. They're just walking down the street talking, but there's a tremendous amount of energy there.
Yeah, and it's not a theme that's really. I've not seen many films about this theme of rejection and not being conventionally attractive, and you don't see that a lot in films.
No, you shouldn't. You certainly don't.
Especially like that part where she realizes that guy is just leaving her at the dance hall, and
yes.
And she starts crying and goes to the bathroom, and I think that's one of the most poignant scenes in the movie, and
yes.
And watching them connect over that, and I think that's really the main theme of this movie, because it really goes deep into that, into something that isn't addressed in films, hardly at all. And even in those scenes where he's walking down, I guess it's 72nd Street, and you see all these people that are just milling around in the street, like sitting on storefronts, and
right.
And it's kind of like, it kind of puts in your face like this is the detritus of this society, and it kind of plays into what you were saying about the supermarkets and him not, he's not going to have a job if he doesn't figure out what's going on. It's like,
yep,
there's all these people that all of a sudden they don't have a place in society, and they're just kind of living to survive and living out their days, and they don't have a significant other. They don't really have anybody that really cares about them. They might not have any friends, and that's a significant portion of society that's I think is so scary to most people, that
yes.
That aloneness, that it's not a theme that's ever addressed in movies. I mean, why would you want to go see a movie about that, right?
Right.
But this movie kind of it addresses that in a bunch of different levels, and at a certain depth of this kind of flotsam and jetsam of society, of people that just as society progresses in this, more materialistic, more capitalistic thing that's going on in the 50s, as that keeps getting deeper and deeper, there's all these people that have real emotions, and they're genuine people, and but they're like shadow people that you just walk by in the street, and maybe if you're someone like me, you'll look them in the eye and try to connect with them, even if you're just walking by them in the street. But most people are deeply afraid of being that person, so they ignore them.
Exactly. Yeah.
and and that I think that theme is also kind of addressed in Dogfight as well, which is a little
Well,
more.
Dogfight has exactly the same scene in a way of when I can't remember the character's name, when Lily Parker, the actress, when she goes into the bathroom and cries.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, those films are linked in this, where you have this girl who's been completely humiliated, but has fought back and goes into the bathroom and cries and pukes.
yeah,
The bathroom scene is very like.
yeah,
I was really struck by that.
yeah, yeah. It's a light film in a way, and there's some stuff that could have been cut out of the film. But there's a few scenes in the film that are like deeply poignant, to a point that again you don't see in film. The
Well, you got these guys who are Marines, and they're about to be shipped overseas, and they're in San Francisco, which is supposed to be a hot town, and no town is a hot town if you don't know anybody in it.
Yeah,
You come to it, and you're on the outside looking in. I don't care how hot the town's reputation, and they have this plan, which is a completely cruel, ugly plan. I mean, the first part of that movie was hard for me to watch.
yeah, yeah,
And where they're gonna have a contest about the ugliest girl, you know, completely unaware of what assholes they are to even fantasize about such a thing, much less do it. And you have this this guy played by River Phoenix, who's better than that, but doesn't know it yet. Somebody's got to teach him that he's better than that, and that's what Lily Parker does, really. Yeah, she wants to believe that she's being selected by this handsome guy, but she's selected for all the wrong reasons, but she's together enough. She's herself enough. So once she realizes what's going on, she's just pissed. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. She slugs him. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. And it kind of wakes him up. And he goes to her now, you know, the movie, in a sense, gives itself away to us when it tells us that this is November 1963. You and I know what's going to happen sometime in that film, because it's November 1963, and it builds to that in a way, but the quick evolution, once the quote unquote dogfight is exposed, that's when the movie takes on life. When he's got to deal with her as a person, that's when it becomes interesting and significant. And those scenes are terrific. Those two work very well together.
yeah, definitely. When you watch the first part of the movie, you really wonder how are they going to pull out of the ugliness of the of this horrible.
Yes, really.
And you almost just want to stop watching it because it's so ugly what they're doing, you know. But I think that there's a theme of the loss of innocence in the movie, and I think that's why it happens on November 21st. It is like the nation has a kind of loss of innocence on that day, and that's kind of being played out through that ugly scene where, you know, it seems on its face it's so sweet that this Marine is asking out this young woman who's not super beautiful or whatever, but it's actually for this horrible reason, and they both kind of have she has a kind of she kind of sees through the facade of all this kind of fake prettiness and fake romance, and he comes to a kind of realization of this is a real person. This isn't just an object for me to play
Right.
with. And then he ends up in Vietnam and has a kind of loss of innocence there. But yeah, what did you
Well,
think
the
of?
Vietnam scene. Yeah, say it again.
What did you think about the period aspect of this movie? Did it seem realistic to you?
Yes, it did. I think they did it tastefully. They didn't try to juice it up. They, clearly they didn't have a whole lot of money for this. And I think that turned out to be a good thing because they couldn't hoke it up much. Their locations were good. It looked 60s. It looked like 1963, and they did. It was written by a woman and directed by a woman, which in 1980, when I think this film was made,
Well, it was written by a
was
man.
really rare.
It was written by a man.
Written by a man? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Bob Comfort.
But
It came out in
okay,
1990, 1991. Yeah.
And then it was and directed by a woman, which was really rare. And what did I start to say? Okay, they did the Vietnam scene very well. They did it very tight. They didn't go jungles and all this stuff. And these guys have been on patrol or whatever, and they think they're safe. They're on a kind of break, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, there's an explosion, and he's wounded, and one of them is dead, and everything has changed, and he comes back to a world, and this is what they really did well. He comes back to a world in 1966, which is completely different. He's demobilized in San Francisco. Which is still a town he doesn't know. He just knows that neighborhood where he had that experience with that girl. And he's got that limp, and he's changed. He doesn't know what the hell has happened to him. And younger people are looking at him like he's a creep because he's still in uniform, even though it's kind of bedraggled. He's got his shirt open. He's wearing a T-shirt. He's obviously not a serving soldier anymore. And he sees her, and it's kind of her coffee shop now. And you see the way she's dressed and the way she's contained. She knows who she is. She knows what she's got. She's a person walking in the world, a world she belongs in. And you see the kind of hippie kind of air around, but she's not one. She's her own person. She can see it as soon as she appears. And it's really marvelous how he doesn't know how to talk. He doesn't know how to express himself. But they hold each other, and he cries. And that's a completely real moment. I was very impressed with that. Nothing said. No conclusions are made. The movie isn't going to give you any dogma one way or another. They hold each other, and he cries. And you see him really crying, and her holding him, and she's not like, oh, my lover has come back. It's not that way at all. She's just doing what she can in that moment. I thought it was a very brave way to do it. It expressed the quality of that time, that we were unaware of. not until friends of mine came back from Vietnam, and I had a hardship deferment. I was supporting my brothers and sister, working a 9-to-5 job, so I didn't go. And friends of mine, some of them joined up. 2 of my high school friends joined up before, when we still believed that everything we were being told was the truth. And other friends were drafted. One of our family friends, Ernie, was a tiny little Puerto Rican guy, and he was a tunnel rat. He went into the tunnels. He came back about 1967. He spent a whole night at our apartment in the Bronx. I mean, really seriously until dawn, telling me about it. That he was friends with my brothers, not me. But to him, I was a grown-up because I was the one supporting. He was my brother's age. He got in when he was quite young. He probably lied about his age. So now he's 19 and he's seen all this stuff. He spent the whole night telling me about it, and then he disappeared. We never saw him again. I never heard from him. So these guys are going in that way, full of belief in their government, full of belief that, they're sending us somewhere, and we're trained to do this, and we're the best, and they're believing everything they've been told. And all of that is all of that horrible thing is in him when he comes back. He's dazed. He's more lost then than he ever was. And he's going to the only person he can go to. I mean, this whole country, there's one person he can go to who might be some sort of even temporary refuge, because he needs to cry. He needs to put his suffering out where he himself can find it. And she seems to understand that, and she holds him. And it's interesting that when he sees her, what I thought was, he's so relieved to see her, and he immediately, he starts weeping almost immediately, because right now she's the most beautiful person in the world as far as he's concerned.
Huh, yeah.
And that doesn't even have anything to do with love. We don't know anything about love right here. Right now, this is the one person in the world with whom he can connect.
Well, I think that her whole persona is really brilliantly built up, because there's that whole purity and hope of folk music, right? And
yes,
that period of time.
That was so poignant.
Yeah, that period of time before the assassination, where there's just this.
Yes.
There's this real hope and Camelot and like the civil rights movement and people that are really.
We shall overcome.
Yeah, we shall overcome,
yeah.
and we're gonna make a change,
yes.
And even though the assassination takes it kind of to another depth, but she's not set off course by that, and she's still
right.
the same person. She still has that base personality and hope and love that is kind of incubating during the first part of the movie, but she's really like solid in that when he comes back, and it's really brilliantly done, and it's something that that I understand really well, is that side of femininity where there's this feminine strength where he's just he's totally beaten and fatigued and just done, and he comes home and she has that kind of incubating, kind of feminine warmth that he needs.
Mm-hmm.
That's really genuine, and she gives it to him, and they connect, even though they're so different. He's just this
Mm-hmm.
kind of wild. I don't want to say right wing, but I don't think he has any politics really. But he's just a kind of
Yeah.
crass, kind of southern type dude. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the Marines were and are. He's just kind of a jarhead, dog face guy. Um,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and but they connect at this very, 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 very deep human level in that last scene, and it's really it's one of my favorite scenes in movies, for all time. Is
So it
that
is.
is that
It's
last
it's a
scene?
great scene.
Yeah,
It is. That whole thing. Uh, because something. How can I put it? Something is accomplished that you don't see in films. A traditional film producer wants to go on from there. Doesn't want to stop there.
yeah,
But that's where something elemental and real and needed, very much needed, happens. And we look at it and it just reaches out because we've all been there in one way or another when that was what we needed, whether we got it or not.
yeah. There's no. She's not like, what's the matter with you and what happened to you, and
Yes,
a
yes,
bunch
yes.
of blah blah blah, and what can I do for you? Do you need something to eat, or oh, come over here? It's not
Yeah.
it's not pity, and it's not
No, it's not pity at
sentimentality.
all.
Yeah, it's just we're gonna connect, um, and the whole thing is kind of the first part of the movie is kind of building something so that last scene is really genuine. That because
Yes.
all these barriers are broken down between them in the first part of the movie,
Right.
and he kind of starts looking at women as real beings, not just as
Mm-hmm.
objects for him to look at. He's not objectifying women anymore, and he's growing out of that kind of in that one night, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like Marty, there's a lot there. There's a lot of depth to the film. What you were saying about I mean, it's a low budget movie, but they do the period part really well. And I think part of
Yes.
that is that they shot it in Seattle and not San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still kind of an oldness to those streets.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever neighborhood they shot it in Seattle. But they really do make it look kind of like Haight-Ashbury during that time.
Yeah, they did a good job of that. They didn't exaggerate it.
Yeah.
Uh, they did a good job of that, and a good job. We see her evolution, but she's not a hippie.
Right.
She doesn't look like a hippie. She looks like she's got her own thing.
Yeah.
And her own style.
Yeah, she's kind of she has kind of like a mother aspect to her.
Yes.
Like a kind of neighborhood mother. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the movie makes me really sad in a lot of ways because it's about things that are very hard to find now. Like
Yes.
those women don't really exist anymore. At least I don't I don't see that anymore. At least in I don't know, not in my life. That whole thing doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really exist anymore. It's people are very suspicious of each other, and I think that there's been a kind of war of the sexes since that time that got
Mm-hmm.
really bitter and was kind of fueled by the media. So it's difficult to connect on that level, at least on a mass scale. But yeah, it there's a kind of weird nostalgia to this movie, but also there's a kind of eternal aspect to it at the same time. Yeah, but
Yes, there is.
yeah,
There is an eternal aspect, and the nostalgia. I wouldn't want to go back to that time, but there were things in that time worth saving.
yeah. Well, you want to stop there?
Okay.
Okay.
Good place.
All right.